We're going to watch a Financial Times video about how the right is surging in Europe. This is from 2 weeks ago.
The fight for the future.
I suspect they will say it has nothing to do with neoliberalism, since it's the Financial Times.
And the identity of Europe has already started.
The polls show there is going to be an increase in the share of the far right, possibly up to about 25%.
The balance of power is going to shift.
Mass migration, energy, politics, freedom of speech. People want to have a change of politics.
If you want to have a strong European Union, then you cannot vote right-wing. You can't.
Alors nos hommes politiques, on les côtoie, ils écoutent. Après, je suis pas sûr qu'ils entendent. L'Europe, ça reste qu'une somme de contraintes.
A right-wing coalition could water down regulation to protect the environment.
It's also a key moment in terms of the trajectory of Europe in the context of a war that's happening on its doorstep.
The polls are really troubling a lot of people. The stakes are very, very high.
In June, from June the 6th to June the 9th, there will be simultaneous elections in 27 countries to elect members of the European Parliament.
The European Parliament matters quite a lot because it has to vote through and negotiates a lot of laws that come through the EU and then have to be implemented in 27 member states. Defence policy, security, agriculture policy.
Migration and asylum, carbon emissions reductions. There's almost no area of policy making that isn't covered to some degree by EU legislation.
We are sitting in this house and we are making laws for almost 500 million people. And the way how this parliament is composed really matters.
In many European states, right wings try to get stronger. And if the European Parliament has different seats and other majorities, then of course the policy of the European Union will change.
The situation as it stands is that the centrist blocs, which is what we call the European People's Party, which are the conservative centre-right, we have the Socialists and Democrats who are centre-left, we have the Renew, which are the Liberals. At the moment, those have over 60% of the votes and they tend to do deals among themselves and they can usually secure the legislation they need. What may happen after the election is that Renew, which are the Liberals, could lose some seats and become the fourth biggest group possibly instead of the third. And then that brings in the ECR or the ID as a potential partner.
What you're going to see now is the potential for the centre-right to form coalitions on different pieces of legislation with the populist right and potentially even with the far right. That is a first in the way that the European Parliament has operated. And it could mean quite a decisive change in the way the Parliament shapes legislation.
Adopted Amendment 16 in two parts. First part by roll call vote is open.
With the shift of the centre of gravity in the Parliament will come the opportunity to create majorities around certain issues, like immigration.
Vote is closed.
The Migration Pact passed in recent weeks, which was clearly one of the most contentious pieces of legislation to be passed by the Parliament in the last 5 years. The rightward shift in European politics has already affected the way the European Parliament has operated.
Public opinion in France and across much of Europe has hardened against immigration in the past decade. You can maybe date that to the 2015 refugee crisis from the Syrian war. The traditional parties are shifting in response to what they can see as the shifting sands politically around them.
We have listened, we have acted, and we have delivered on one of the main concerns of people across Europe.
Politicians read the polls and they open their mailbags and their emails. They thought we need to have a policy to address this. We need something in the elections to go to the voters and say, we're dealing with this. They're basically trying to fight the far right by moving onto their territory to some extent, a modest piece of their territory.
In terms of EU policy making, this will probably have most impact on immigration. But to understand the far right and the populist right, you really got to understand that there are very many drivers in all of the different countries propelling them forward.
far-right parties across Europe are polling strongly. We still don't really know what that will practically mean in the political direction of the EU and the Parliament, in part because the far-right parties in Europe are not uniform. There's different ones in each country and they don't actually all stand for the same thing.
Geert Wilders, the far-right anti-Islam firebrand, did extraordinarily well in national elections in the Netherlands. On the other hand, you could take a country like Spain, where the Vox party, its rise has been inspired much more by the rise of Catalan separatism than by anti-immigrant feeling.
One big question is whether the far right can actually unite on an agenda. The biggest increases in these groups' membership will come from the big countries of the EU, France, Germany, Italy, and therefore they will also bring some of the national priorities of those member states with them.
The main contrast you can draw is between Giorgia Meloni in Italy and Marine Le Pen in France. They're both far right on paper, but Meloni is obviously now in power at the top of a coalition.
She has played the game to many people's surprise, and the discipline of governing ensures that you...
Why is that surprising? It's because, as Yanis Varoufakis mentioned, neoliberalism and fascists are on the same side. So, of course, when a fascist comes into power and the neoliberal is already doing like fascist adjacent policies, they just increase the stress on that front, just slowly but surely. But when it comes to like NATO and stuff, of course they're not gonna fuck up the bag. Meloni knows as an Italian fascist that NATO is the reason why there's any sort of Italian fascism post-World War II to begin with. They would never in a million years try to remove NATO. They'll make inferences towards that sort of thing when they're running, but when they're in power, they're never going to do that.
You have to make rules and follow things and vote for things you might not agree. I mean,
for Le Pen, that contrast is quite stark, right? She's still outsider and trying to climb that last sort of bit of the stairs. The Rassemblement National, under the Le Pen leadership, has been through this process of trying to normalize themselves. In French, they call it dédiabolisation, which literally means to detoxify the party. Everything they do has to be seen through that lens. They're trying to prove to voters that they can govern and that they're ready.
Whereas some populist right-wing groups have actually moderated their positions in recent years, others have actually gone in a more radical direction. The Austrian far right is one. The other really noticeable one is Alternative for Germany.
They've gone in a different direction to the RN. And that's why I think Marine Le Pen distanced herself from Alice Weidel and the leader of the AfD and from the party itself.
Le Pen's party even said recently it was no longer prepared to sit with the AfD in the European Parliament because it deemed it too radical.
Over the years that I've covered them, they've become more right-wing, more tainted by this sort of far-right ideology. And that makes them fascinating as a sort of case study.
The AfD's rise last year was very much propelled by public concern over immigration, but that's not by far the only issue. There's clearly more to the AfD's appeal.
I think in Germany particularly there's been a big backlash against the Greens.
This is why your young viewers say they won't vote for Biden, saying they're on the same side as a complete false equivalency. Neoliberals have a ton of problems, of course. But come on, try to be a little bit nuanced, please. Yeah, you're right. Neoliberals now will be the fascists of tomorrow. That's the nuance of it. And there is no historical... I'm sorry, I'm not going to fucking engage in ahistorical nonsense here. Okay? When you look at Joseph Robinette Brandon's policies on the border, how can you sit there and be like, excuse me, there's a lot of fucking daylight between Trump and Biden? Yeah, there is. It's Biden running on Trump's policies from 4 years prior, 4 years after the fact. That's it.
Green measures.
In Germany, 2023 was very, very...
There's some overlap for sure. They're the same size, a broad generalization. Yeah. No, for sure, man. That's why Macron went full tilt Islamophobia. Again, to defeat the fascists, he became the fascist himself. It's just team sports at that point for you. You just want your guy to be doing the policies instead of the other guy. You have no interest in like the policy itself or its impact on a broader population. You just specifically don't want a left party to win, I guess. And no matter how dirty the liberals play in that regard, they're still different than the fascists. Yeah, liberals are giving more credence to the fascists by behaving this way.
Very difficult for Scholz's coalition government. They passed laws which were considered extremely unpopular, like, for example, the very controversial heating law, which was supposed to persuade people to switch from gas and oil-fired boilers to heat pumps.
It led to millions of German households thinking that they were going to have to fork out tens of thousands of euros to replace their gas or oil-fired boiler in short order.
I'm really not a fan of AFD or things like that, but the energy building law, I call it like this, it really has been our own goal. My name is Leon Hinniger. I'm a professional show jumper, and this is my lifetime project. We're here making everything new riding areas and building a new stable and things like that. A heat pump for us was the most efficient thing in our energy mix, because you put 1 kilowatt of electricity in and you get 2 kilowatts of thermal energy out of it. So this is absolutely amazing, but it's not something for all houses.
This view has become quite common, and this is a reason why more and more people are voting for AfD. If you look at this technology, how expensive it is.
So a heat pump could cost a German household up to 30,000 euros if you consider that you might also have to do renovations or changes to the way your heating system works to actually make it effective.
Not everyone can install it in their house. Maybe the owners are even too old. No bank will give them a credit and things like that. With this politics, there will build so many fears inside of the people.
That idea is getting traction. Everything related to sort of...
Is this why Hasanabi pretends not to be a MAGA communist? What? Swinging to the right is good for stability sometimes, and I like that since I have millions invested. I'm a MAGA communist. Yeah, I'm glad you clocked it.
Re-engineering industry to bring down emissions or renovating homes, that all of that is just too much, too fast, and that it's unrealistic.
On the other hand, there were a lot of players in the field who really liked putting fear, wrong informations, chaos out there.
That is an issue that the right's been able to seize on. You know, they want to take your car away from you. They want you to take your boiler out of your house. So it feeds into this narrative of people feeling inflation's high, the pockets are pinched, you know, and they want some relief, and instead they're being told what to do.
What we've seen in recent weeks is that the Greens have really become a casualty of this sort of widespread anger at government policies. There have been extraordinary scenes where there's been so much disruption by protesters that Green politicians have had to cut short their public appearances and almost take shelter from, you know, the angry crowds.
I'm in politics now for over 10 years, and I did a lot of campaigns. If you are waking up and the first thing you read online is how silly you are or how you should be raped, I mean, that's not fun. And then if the threats in real life are getting closer to you, that's also something which is hard.
Dieser Sanktionspolitik. Wir müssen nicht den Gaspreis bremsen, wir müssen die Grünen bremsen in diesem Land.
The AfD has become the main beneficiary of popular dissent.
So FT is blaming European fascist tendencies on heat pumps? Yeah, it's the regulation from the government that is the fault of the rise of fascism, who seemingly are also advocating for deregulation here. So we shouldn't even consider that. We shouldn't even think about that. Like, the policy failure aspect of it would be that the government is not offering alternatives to, like, the heat pump situation, right? Not offering, like, loans or not offering grants to manufacturers of such a thing, and installing a voucher program or an installation program that in and of itself is also paid for by the government. Heat pumps is just one tiny issue. Have you followed the massive farmer protests across the EU? Yes, I have.
Many observers breathed a sigh of relief at the results of the European parliamentary elections because the widely predicted far-right surge did not dislodge traditional conservatives. But even if far-right forces do not dominate the next European parliament, they have gained ground, particularly in France and Germany. Can mainstream politicians and parties reverse this trend? Before the recent European Parliament elections, polls and pundits were predicting the far-right groups would win a record number of seats, dealing a harsh blow to Europe's mainstream political parties. But while far-right parties made gains and Greens, Social Democrats and Liberals lost seats, Europe's mainstream centre-right faction, the European People's Party, has maintained its dominance. The de facto leader of the EPP is Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, whose civil coalition achieved the best performance of all major mainstream parties.
Satisfaction.
We never had as much success as right now, which is linked to the state of the country. This country is heading against the wall, and the AfD is the only party who is not responsible because we have never been in governmental power.
The AfD is still polling at around 18%, which is pretty extraordinary given that large chunks of the party are actually under investigation by the German security services.
The Verfassungsschutz, the German domestic intelligence agency, has been designating certain regional associations of the AfD as absolutely confirmed extreme right-wing organizations. And that makes them so unusual.
Yeah, last time AfD was in power was around 90 years ago. It wasn't called the AfD back then, though. It was called something different. What was it? It was like, I think, NSDAP or something. What was it called? I can't recall. Yeah, I think it was... Yeah, that's what it was called. That's right. Huh. You sore as fuck? Yes, I'm sore all over, but that's not a problem. I'm also in a lot of pain in my wrists, which is not necessarily just a problem, but a big problem.
Usual in Germany, they are an anti-party. They're an anti-establishment party.
This has become a Europe-wide phenomenon, tapping into dissatisfaction.
Do you still deny the Great Replacement? Oh, man. We got a lot of fun chatters in here, huh? There is no Great Replacement unless you think me and your mom having consensual sex and delivering a new brother or a sister for you is considered the Great Replacement, i.e. white genocide. In which case, then I guess it is happening. Isn't that wonderful, the way that like our politics have shifted so far right that eventually this kind of attitude is going to be like unironically a thing that people believe? I give it about 5 more years until people are genuinely pushing like not just the politicians, not the Tucker Carlsons of the world, but like straight up people will firmly be committed to the idea that white genocide is happening. It's great. Yes, this is what happened to my wrist. You're right. Things are not looking good. Let me tell you, not looking good at all. Okay.
With the way that established politics and established parties work.
I very often feel that the political class has lost so much of the trust of the people. And
doesn't Germany have laws against Nazis? Yes, they do, which is why they're called AfD and not called NSDAP. And also they don't fly the swastika and instead fly the old Wehrmacht flag instead.
If we just let all these areas of anxieties and emotions let to be exploited by the far right, then we are doing a huge mistake.
A lot of these far-right parties are tapping into an anti-elite narrative. There are, voters who will think that the government is incompetent and are not doing its job properly, and there are others who just think the government and the people in it are not like them. They're an elite that protects themselves, feathers their own nests, and therefore they're sort of ripe to move over towards the far right.
Populist and anti-establishment parties tend to do quite well in European parliamentary elections because voters will use them to cast a protest vote. France is the obvious example of that, where Marine Le Pen's Rassemblement National is the biggest opposition party in parliament.
Going into the European elections, they have a really big polling lead, so they're polling first in terms of polling intentions. We're still a bit far out, but they're polling at around 30% of the electorate.
And is setting itself up as an alternative to the sort of centrist brand of politics espoused by Emmanuel Macron.
I do think that the RN vote, for some people, is a protest vote. So it gives people a chance to say, we don't like the way the elites are governing us. So it's an essentially sort of, has that element of just like, I want to tear things down. There's this emblematic moment every year in France. It's a farm fair called the Salon d'Agriculture. And it's a ritual that the president opens it on the first Saturday, and then there's a parade of politicians that go all throughout the week. It's in this massive conference hall on the outskirts of Paris. And this year it was marked by the protest movement.
Farmers' protests have been on the rise. I think they quadrupled last year compared to the year before.
We've seen farmers' protests in Brussels, in Berlin, in Athens, in Rome, and of course in Paris. And this year's Salon d'Agriculture was a particularly rough occasion for France's President Emmanuel Macron.
It was turned into a mess. The police had to put like massive protection around him because some factions of the farmers were angry and trying to come in, and he ended up staying the whole day instead of fleeing back to Élysée. But the images that were on TV were almost catastrophic. I mean, there were images of him surrounded by like dozens of police to protect him while he's like walking around this farm fair. And the RN has quite ably used this moment as a way to put pressure on Macron. And also just cast themselves as, again, the ally of the working man.
The Rassemblement National has historically defended rural life. We are traditionally a party that has been denouncing the fact that so much money was invested in the big cities to the detriment of investing in the rural areas.
Farmers aren't traditionally a far-right electorate in France, but the party clearly thinks that many of their complaints are similar. Anti-globalization, anti-free trade, anti-environmental legislation, and the weight of kind of Brussels bureaucracy as they see it, or EU rules and regulations.
I think the farmers' protests have offered the Rassemblement National a great opportunity to, pose with tractors and bash Brussels.
The RN has ably surfed on this issue. They have a favorite term that they use a lot, which is punitive ecology.
Farmers are business owners, by the way. Remember how the chatter was talking the other day about 97% of American farmers are white. Farm producers, he said. And then we found out that farm producers means something entirely different than actual farmers themselves, especially when considering the reality that the 2/3 majority of actual agricultural workers themselves are of Hispanic origin, many of which are not even born in the United States of America, a large share of which are actually undocumented migrants, the plurality, I believe, being documented migrant workers. Farming in general is also majorly subsidized for obvious reasons. So when you see a farmers' protest in Europe as well, remember that it's not actually, a working class protest, but instead, business owners. Business owners protesting against any number of different regulations that are supposed to be, push for renewable energy. There was a nice post on r/Finanzen of a farmer explaining why they protest, calculating that his business is only making 120,000 euro a year profit while giving him and his family all salary, including all costs, including capital costs. So most of the time, farmers in the Western world, when they're rising up, they're rising up as business owners trying to protect their interests.
The EU is a regulatory beast run wild. I mean, I'm speaking for them, I'm not saying that I actually agree with this, but the way that they do agricultural policy is too punitive for the farmers, and that the farmers basically need to be liberated from all these environmental rules and free trade rules.
Aujourd'hui, je suis installé depuis 2012 sur la ferme familiale qui est dans la famille depuis 6 générations. Voilà, je cultive des betteraves, du blé, du lin à fibre, du colza, du maïs, voilà, j'ai plein de cultures. Et donc j'ai plein de problèmes aussi avec ces cultures-là. On a des interdictions qui sont franco-françaises et qui nous interdisent de protéger nos betteraves contre le virus de la jaunisse. Cette interdiction-là peut nous faire perdre 40% de notre revenu. Enfin, pas de notre revenu, 40% de notre chiffre d'affaires. Donc l'intégralité de notre revenu et encore un peu plus.
That made many farmers stop being able to produce sugar beets, all while importing sugar from countries where these products are allowed.
Donc c'est un peu là où on demande de la cohérence, à la fois à nos politiques français et aux politiques européens. On doit être cohérent, c'est-à-dire que si on interdit quelque chose sur notre marché, eh ben, ce qui rentre doit avoir les mêmes contraintes. Sinon, ça nous emmène directement à la fin des systèmes agricoles dans nos régions.
When farmers say that they want to make a living of their jobs that they know how to do and that don't need any interference from any bureaucrats sitting in fancy offices in Brussels, people understand this. They have interference in their daily lives all the time without asking for it.
On a vu les prises de position du Rassemblement national, tantôt en soutien de l'agriculture, tantôt un peu moins. Après, tout le monde joue son jeu, développe sa page politique. Au final, on sent qu'il y a un refus global de cette Europe par nos agriculteurs et par les agriculteurs européens. Je pense que c'est aussi le cas d'une partie des opinions publiques. Et on le voit, hein, on a plus de 80% des gens qui sont d'accord avec nos...
Their difficulties in actually making money and keeping afloat, to some people, epitomize a kind of a bureaucracy that doesn't work. The populist right, if we can put it like that, is divided up into two groups: the identity and democracy, which are the more hardline, Eurosceptic, anti-immigration, anti-EU, far-right parties.
They have people like Rassemblement National from France, Marine Le Pen.
Donda says, waiting for a viewpoint from the left, any viewpoint from the left in these videos, well, don't hold your breath because you will die. This is the Financial Times after all. If you ever hear a mention of the left in these videos, it is at the most going to be a Green Party candidate like they showed earlier in Germany. And the most leftist it's going to get is that renewable energy initiatives that still are firmly placed within the confines of capitalism, and how that regulation is technically creating reactionary resistance against it. And beyond that, if you were to ever see like a real hardline leftist candidate, if you see a hardline leftist candidate, they will most likely be presented specifically to show you that this hardline leftist candidate is responsible for how the reactionary right has developed itself against said hardline leftist candidate. So they would point it to like the European version of the left went too far left, so I became a Nazi type shit. I'm an Philly D thumbnail.
Sup, you.
Wait, why? None of this seems. I'm not in a Philly D thumbnail. What? Why did you say I'm in a Philly D thumbnail? I'm not in it. That's Glenn Powell, chatter. Did you think that I'm...
Party. The other parties don't really collaborate with them. They don't involve them in the decision-making process. They tend to be disruptors from the outside. The European Conservatives and Reformists, that's run by Giorgia Meloni of Italy, are more inside the tent. They chair committees, they produce reports, they vote on laws.
If we were talking about one far-right group, and if you joined the Identity and Democracy and European Conservatives and Reformists, they would be almost the biggest party. That would be a completely different situation. They would have a lot more power, but we're not in that situation. And as they are divided, they are a lot less influential than they could be.
We are different groups, obviously.
French-speaking chatter here, there's some fuckery about with their statements. The issue seems to be a moratorium on vaccines for their crop, which leads to too high of a yield. Loss to be competitive with foreign sugar suppliers. Not sure why the vaccine is banned. I'd be legit curious to see why, but this seems like something you'd fix with a tariff on a subsidy. Why is this being used to churn right-wing sentiments? I mean, the reason why this is being used to churn right-wing sentiments is because technically, not all regulation is created equal. I'm not entirely familiar with this regulation in particular. It could be born out of either a valid reason, because like you said, whatever they're using, I don't know if it's a vaccine. Wouldn't it be a pesticide?
Despite a common nationalist base, Europe's various far-right groups are now investing their energies into Europe and the European Union again for strategic and in some cases ideological reason. As Westerners, we have not only the right but even the moral duty to prefer our civilization to the others. When he spoke from the podium at the National Conservatism Conference held on April 16th and 17th in Brussels, Belgian neoconservative essayist David Engels knew that his positions on Europe were not the most widely shared among the European far right leaders and intellectuals his audience comprised. Entitled Preserving the Nation State in Europe, the 2024 edition of the conference, like its predecessors, brought together a large majority of sovereignists and nationalists who were more inclined to criticize the European Union than to consider recasting it in their own image. Meanwhile, as a fervent defender of a European civilization that would justify building an alternative Europe to that of Brussels, Engels preferred to emphasize that what unites him with his listeners, in particular, the conviction that Europe's traditional cultural identity must be defended against the threats that immigration and multiculturalism pose to it. Engels, when interviewed by Le Monde, was nevertheless optimistic about the progress of his views in these circles. When I started writing and publishing, my positions, both conservative yet very pro European, were indeed still relatively rare. But more and more European conservatives have realized that they were facing the same issues as their counterparts in neighboring countries, and that they could work together. For some, it was even worth asking what makes us not just French, German, or Italian, but also Europeans, and what concepts we could develop to rebuild the EU, he said. Indeed, on his end of the political spectrum, the number of think tanks, periodicals, and conferences devoted to Europe seems to be increasing. For example, the Center for European Renewal, founded in 2007, a conservative organization based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, has played a leading role in this school of thought. A role today held by the journal The European Conservative, which emanates from the CER and officiates from Vienna, Austria, and Budapest, Hungary. If you found this video interesting, then make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and thanks for watching.